Awesome. Okay. So SAFE is a framework, and the framework is by nature flexible, right? When you think about the definition of what a framework is, it's a basic conceptual structure as of ideas, right? And so the basic structure of something, for example, these influences threaten the very framework of our society, right? It's a set of ideas or facts that provide support for something. This book provides a general framework for understanding modern politics, right? And so when we look at this, SAFE is a framework. It's not a process, right? And you can turn SAFE into something really unpleasant. And you can also keep the framework very flexible, right? So if you want to become rigid, basically try and do every single thing on this big picture all at once, no matter what, right? Well, SAFE says you have to this. Well, SAFE says you have to this. Well, SAFE says you have to this. That's not how this is designed. The framework provides a great deal of guidance and lots of great practices and connects you to the values and principles that'll allow them to stick. But it doesn't tell you, doesn't say you must do this always, right? Now, with anything, you want to try and do what's recommended first. If for some reason you can't, understand what it might cost you to not that recommendation, right? To keep the framework flexible, you want to follow the implementation roadmap as a guide, not as a manual. I've seen somebody who's taken this implementation roadmap and they've added their own steps to it. They had almost 100 extra steps on this roadmap. You must do all 100 of these. Oh, you want to launch an art? You're going to need 4 SPCs for at least 2 years. Right? And I don't believe in that myself. For me, every context, every implementation is different. What's the same is that it's a framework. And so I'm going to walk you through some thoughts about the implementation roadmap and about SAFE in general. And when we think about this, when you're going to implement the framework, why are you implementing it? What are you measuring? Are you implementing it so that you can say, hey, we implemented SAFE? Or are you implementing it so you can deliver more value sooner at a pace you can sustain and improve? Do you want business agility? The ability to pivot, to shift, to have the resiliency and the ability to pivot to the changes of the market, change your strategy even, right? So the secret's in the journey. Now, I will mention a little bit here that when you first get going, ask yourself, do you have the support of your executives and those leaders, or do you have their engagement? And while you can certainly implement SAFE with leadership support, if you implement it with leadership engagement, it's different. And so a lot of things I'm going to talk about today as I walk us through the implementation roadmap is going to be focused on the idea that you're working towards leadership engagement. Now, as a change agent, you'll want to check and see what you do have.
Oh, good Lord, you saw them together, didn't you?
There we go. I apologize for muting people, but needed to do that. All right. So, oh, good Lord. So think about this, right? Does the person say, yeah, you can do that. I endorse this. Give me the SAFE, right? But they don't understand what it is they need to do. They don't understand SAFE. Oh, SAFE's that thing that IT does, right? It has the release train person and stuff, right? Or they'll assign somebody to do this. Whereas engaged leaders, they're going to see the progress, the success, this new way of working themselves. They're going to cultivate shared ownership within the implementation. And so, what's that level you have? And anything you see that we talk about today, it's not about what's right or wrong. It's about understand where you're at, know where you're at and start from there. And so if you've got some of the stuff on here that's kind of make it rigid or as opposed to keeping it flexible, then just look at those as opportunities, put them on your improvement backlog. So don't feel like you're not doing something right if you're more rigid today. You can definitely move away from that. Why would you want to do that? Anybody have any thoughts as to why you'd want to keep things flexible as opposed to staying rigid?
Okay. Because the world is never what you really expect it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, and once you start, everything you do, you're gonna learn something. And so if you assume that it's always the same way over and over again, then you're going to run into some challenges. So let's walk through each step in the implementation roadmap. So the tipping point, right? So I mentioned leadership. It starts with leadership. You need engagement if you can get it. As an SPC or a change agent, be prepared for the what is safe question. Well, SAFE's a set of training materials. Well, SAFE's a freely available knowledge base. Well, SAFE's a set of principles and practices for business agility. Understand what that is and what it isn't. And what you can find, there's lots of information out there. There's an overview of SAFE and kind of gives you an understanding. For me personally, I view SAFE as a vehicle, probably the best one in the market, for achieving success with Lean Agile at scale, for achieving business agility, to become more profitable if you're a commercial entity, to become to serve the country more if you're a federal or state entity. Be really aware of this tipping point conversation being embracing the values, the core values of SAFE, such as transparency. So don't sugarcoat this. Right, you really want to make sure that everybody understands what you're getting involved in, and the mindset that you have matters. One of the things that's coming soon, was talked about at the SAFE Summit recently, is this leadership learning experience, a cohort-based learning experience about leading in the digital age. That's so important because the mindset that the leaders have is so critical, and it's such an influence on how well you do with the Scaled Agile Framework. So when you look at this tipping point, it's a journey. You want to lead this from within with partners for support, and focus on the outcomes. If you want it to be a little more rigid, then toggle switch, give me the safe. Go launch 60 arts at the same time. Who cares if they're ready or not, right? Let's hire a partner to come in and do it all for us. Let's focus on SAFE as a process. Let's build a playbook for it, right? So these are all just kind of different ways of looking at this. And so ask yourself where you are when you start this journey, right? If you did start it where maybe you had an external partner do it all for you, well, then how can you bring some of that inside, that knowledge and experience inside your own company so that you can kind of change from within? For me, as somebody who's interviewed a lot of coaches over the years, when somebody works for a consultant and consultancy and they say, I led the transformation there, I led the transformation there, I led the transformation there, it's like, well, what was your customer doing? What happened after you left? And while I've certainly been in a lead role, we had that conversation with the customer, the cost of, hey, we can do this for you. However, understand that eventually we're going to need to find a way for you to be able to do it yourself. So you have that sustainability. And so it is a journey, not a toggle switch. You can't just do it all at once. So you've had the tipping point conversation. You decided we're going SAFE. Now, the next step on the journey is to train your Lean Agile change agents. Well, ask yourself, who are the Lean Agile change agents? Are they leaders? Are they managers? Are they agilists? Are they SPCs? Are they the coaches that you already have working inside? Do you build them from within, hire somebody to come in and mentor them? Do you hire them and they're internal? Do you go out and find a partner to do it all? A little bit of both, right? So we want you to find the right combination that enables internal change to occur and be sustained and improved over time. And so with your change agents, do you have, if you have nobody and all you have is external people, then your journey is going to be really slow and it's going to be hard to make it stick. However, if you have only external people, your journey is also going to be slow because you're not going to get any buy-in from people internally. So you want to find that right combination. And when you do look at finding that right partner, what are the skills, the certification, the experience they have, right? Ask yourself, is this partner or SPC or change agent invested in the company's outcomes, or are they invested in their own personal outcomes? Do they see it as your transformation or theirs? Safe experience is a huge thing when you're first getting started for the first time. You definitely will benefit from tapping into some people who have significant safe experience. Now, if you can hire a consultant that's got experience, fantastic. If you can't, there's other ways to do it. I've been in situations where I've worked at a company where I wasn't able to bring in a bunch of consultants to help me. but I did find individuals that were willing to donate their time to the community. I watched webinars that have been recorded. I went to meetups. I picked people's brains, and found that was how I was able to learn. So there's lots of different ways out there in the government sector. In fact, you can actually find other government agencies that have done it and go do some Gemba, go watch what they've done. Mr. Robertson here with us, he used to be the RTE for a joint U.S. Air Force, U.S. Army Agile Release Train. And he had other Army programs come in and observe the planning event. He's had NASA come in and observe the planning event before they started their own journey, to kind of get an understanding of what they've got. But when you're talking to your partners and your SPCs, and you're looking to vet them for safe experience, what you want to find out is, did they make this happen? Did they enable it to happen? Did they just see it happen? Or they never even saw any of it, but they had the certification, right? So I've met individuals that fall into all four of those buckets. And depending on what you're trying to accomplish, if all you're doing is trying to check the box on a corporate objective that you implement safe, then any SPC will help, right? If you're trying to actually make sustainable change, or grow that capability inside so that you can do it by yourself in the future, you probably do want to get somebody or tap into some learning network or something where you can do it together. So lots of opportunities here, right? Researcher instructors, research their experience, right? Enable your servant leaders to be able to do this. Have coaches and SPCs that are focused on your mission, not theirs, right? So I can enable you to lead your own transformation versus I got the playbook, do what I say, or you're going to fail, right? Or I know what SAFE says you should do. SAFE says you must this, SAFE says you must that, right? It's not, don't create enforcers. Don't just take the class and check the box. I've seen people that have attempted to implement the framework by simply reading the articles on the website. And while you can find some practices there on the Scaled Agile Framework website that may help you improve, it's definitely not a replacement for planning a transformation to a new way of working. So next step on our journey here, we're going to train our executives, our managers, and our leaders. Now, leaders often have titles and positions that indicate they're leaders, but many who provide leadership on the Agile Release Train don't have those formal or traditional indicators of leadership. So you can usually identify true leaders by their actions, not just their titles. And when we think about the leaders that we want to train, we want them to understand that, when we look at delivering value, leadership's the foundation, and we have to ask ourselves, are they going to invest their time? Do they want to understand this? Are they willing to explore and to change? And will they lead the implementation? And if the answer is no to all of these, then you're going to have a tough time with your safe implementation. Being able to do more than you're going to make it pretty rigid if you don't have leaders that are willing to be involved. Right? The House of Lean reminds us that the value that we all strive to provide our customers with can only be realized when we establish a solid foundation of Lean Agile leadership. And so those leaders provide the vision, the change leadership, they lead by example that enable these pillars to actually be done here. The mindset matters as well. When you look at the framework and you look at implementing it, real Lean Agile change requires a shift away from traditional mindsets. In fact, many of the classes that we teach as part of the Scaled Agile Framework, the one I'm thinking about right now is LPM, Lean Portfolio Management. One of the first things we talk about is this shift to a new mindset. And, when we look at this, it's critical. There was a memo written in the government a couple of years ago, where it was said that avoid rigid and prescriptive frameworks like SAFE. And I remember the time my customer was a government customer, and he laughed out loud when he heard about that, because for him, SAFE was all about, and I've got a quote at the end of this deck. His name was Joe. I got a quote at the end of this deck he supplied. And for him, it was all about changing the way you looked at everything, changing the mindset and breaking the mold. However, I've met individuals out there that SAFE is this oppressive thing. the mindset matters. I think about a young coach that I worked with in the government sector who I remember she was teaching her first class, her first public class, and she stumbled a little bit because the materials talked about a lot of stuff. It was an advanced Scrum Master course, a lot of stuff that she wasn't allowed to do because their middle management didn't allow those things to happen. And so it was kind of this hybrid course where half the people were for her customer and half the people were from the public sector, just public people who signed up. And it was like, what? Scrum Masters are supposed to do that? What? Scrum Masters don't do status reports? What do you mean the team creates their own plan inside PI planning? No, PI objectives are what the leadership management writes the PI objectives and supplies them to the teams at the beginning of PI planning, right? No. And so that mindset matters. And this is, once again, not a matter of I have it or I don't. It's a matter of where you are on your journey. And so if you know that you've got some really traditional fixed mindset leaders, just be aware of that. Will help you make some adjustments on your journey. Yeah. So actually read that engagement actually did, because it was the managers who were paying for coaching that didn't challenge them on anything. So yeah. And you may encounter this, right? Some people may want just safe. They want to check the boxes and say they're safe. Or maybe the partner you have, Agile is just the door to staffing, right? So they're going to have Agile coaches come in and meet your build a relationship, and then get all their staffing people in. I mean, there's lots of different reasons people do things, but you definitely will want a growth mindset to be able to truly excel with the framework, which kind of takes us back to that next piece, right? So how do you keep the framework flexible? Number one, be willing to be uncomfortable. This is change. Change is hard, right? This isn't one person's vision that everybody else reluctantly joins. This needs to have real commitment across the team, shared learning, shared understanding. You want to understand everybody's perspectives. By understanding different perspectives, you'll be able to get alignment. By being transparent, you'll be able to find that alignment as well. Now, become rigid. You can break the framework by limiting change to what's comfortable. Oh, PI planning 2 days, or what, more than 2 days because we're remote, 2.5 days, 3 days for PI planning. No. We can't authorize that. We'll only do a half-day PI planning event. The teams don't need to be there. Just the Scrum Master. We did the Scrum Masters last time. This time, just the dev leads and product owners. That's all we need at the 4-hour PI planning event, right? So don't change. If you're going to diverge from what hundreds and hundreds of implementations have said works, understand what it may cost you, right? Assign one leader to drive the change, one perspective to rule them all. I'm guilty of that early in my journey. I thought I was doing so great, my first safe implementation. And in hindsight, everybody was happy. I was happy. I was on top of the world. And I realized looking back that I didn't do anything to get anybody else ready to actually keep this thing going. So when I left that particular company, it all imploded, not because I was that indispensable, but because I had never helped anybody understand why we were doing a lot of these things. So also another thing, don't just train IT. Eventually you're going to need the business involved. And so IT oftentimes will start the transformation, but you'll ultimately need to be able to get some business engagement. And some enterprises actually even get some customer engagement. So we're on our implementation roadmap. We now we've hit the tipping point. We've trained our managers, executives, and leaders. We've identified our change agents, and it's time to create our lace, right? So when you look at your lace, there's lots of things to think about here. What kind of scope do they have? What kind of authority and responsibility do they have? Are they a volunteer organization? Are they full-time, permanent, temporary? Are they internal people? Did you go out and buy your lace? How big is it? What model are they using? All sorts of considerations. And so I will tell you that I worked at a Fortune 10 company as an internal person, and I was a volunteer for our Agile community of practice kind of thing at Agile COE. And eventually Agile got popular enough that they assigned a director to be in charge of it. And over the next couple of years, I watched as she ruled with an iron fist right? Agile was what she said it was, and what her, quite frankly, it was more about what her people said it was. And so we had these Agile coaches who had their clipboards and their assessments, and they would come in if they heard the word Scrum or they heard user story, they would just swarm on you and basically assess you and then determine if you were bronze, silver, or gold level of agility. And part of my own learning journey was realizing that it wasn't okay to just avoid them. That's actually how I got my own start with SAFE, is I was avoiding our internal COE because they were Agile and this was safe. So I didn't have to touch the COE. But ultimately it was partnering with that LACE and helping them understand some of the patterns that might allow them to be more successful. And I ultimately was able to go back and help that LACE move from being this push-based LACE to more of a pull-based LACE where, hey, we're looking at implementing Lean Agile at scale. We'd be silly not to talk to so-and-so and the LACE. So it's important to understand what you have and what you're working with and why they're there. SAFE has a great toolkit to launch a LACE. It's interestingly enough, one of the things it has is an elevator pitch and some metrics. Ask yourself, if we can't actually measure our efficacy, then why would we expect the company to fund us? So, all right. So when it comes to the LACE, be pulled in to help, right? Foster collaboration. As a LACE, people are going to be experimenting. Learn from them. Find those best practices. You find best practices by talking to people and getting insights into what they've tried and what's worked and what hasn't. Right? We want to enable people, facilitate self-assessments, encourage growth, have value-based metrics as opposed to vanity metrics, right? Hey, as a LACE, I know how effective we are. We've launched X number of arts. We've trained 1,000 people. Well, what does that actually tell us about delivering more value sooner? Maybe it's a leading indicator, and you can make an argument for as a leading indicator, but that metric by itself doesn't really tell you if you're actually getting value from the new way of working. But you can break your LACE, push SAFE on people, be the SAFE playbook people, the SAFE assessors, right? And ensure compliance to the process. Assess others and tell them what they need to change, especially if you're not asked. Prevent, if you're an SPC, you have to work for the LACE. You can't be an SPC if you're not a LACE. What? RTE wants to become an SPC? Personally, I think it's a fantastic idea for RTEs to become SPCs. But if you're not allowed to because you're not part of the LACE, that's a problem, right? The LACE owns the transformation. Well, what if the business and IT and the people own the transformation? The LACE is there to help guide them. And so think about this, right? And by the way, all these things I'm talking about, they apply. I've done Scrum at scale. I've done Nexus. I haven't done less. I've done some Spotify-ish stuff. And a lot of these things that prevent SAFE from staying flexible are also things that would prevent any other scaling framework from being flexible as well. Okay. All right. Identify your value streams and arts. So we've trained our leaders, managers, executives. We have our LACE. It's time to actually identify our value streams and arts. Well, first off, this is a place where, as a change agent, you're going to get some resistance. Oh, we already know our value streams. We have one for each of our VPs, or one for each of our products, or one from each of our silos, right? Or one of my personal favorites is I met a customer that wanted our help, and this is a few years ago, and I said, let's talk, hey, we need to look at doing a value stream workshop. Oh, we already know what our value streams are. Oh, really? Yeah. After I took Leading SAFE, I went back and I wrote them all down. And it's like, that's not how this works here, right? So we want to understand this is a critical workshop. In fact, the framework, as they expand their body of knowledge, for those individuals that are either part of a SAFE Enterprise subscription or have a SAFE certification or taken a class, they have access to the SAFE community portal, which has become a fantastic resource. And one of the things on there is basically all about organizing around value. And it actually helps people understand how to communicate the need for this value stream workshop and how to plan for it, how to execute it, and what to do afterwards. It is a group event. The idea here is that we want to understand, we want to understand how value flows, right? So each value stream, specifically a development value stream, is a sequence of steps used to deliver value to the customer. And so we've got an operational value stream, which is a triggering event through value delivered. And then what's supporting that with SAFe, where we find our agile release trains, are these development value streams. And those development value streams are all the people needed to design, build, test, deploy, support, operate that particular solution or set of systems. And so when we look at the framework, we want to find ways to align around value and optimize for flow versus aligning our stuff around existing organizational structure, building it around a silo or a project, a product line, or sadly making decisions based on span of control, silos, et cetera, right? This is probably, of all the SPCs I've mentored on my journey, this is probably the one that most of them have struggled with at some point, myself included, where it was too hard to get people to actually do this workshop. I'll tell you that it's one of the best workshops you can do. For me, I love doing it collaboratively, where you've got people from all aspects of the potential value stream providing their input, where Mike over here in product, he sees this as one step, but over in IT, Marco sees it as 5 steps, where vice versa, Marco sees this thing that Mike does as 1 step, but Mike sees it as 5 steps. And so understanding those different perspectives and getting alignment and transparency into how value flows is really important. So definitely, if your art's not aligned around value, that's okay. In fact, I've had situations where we've gone through, we've identified the value streams, and the customer has still chosen to align around products or line around leaders. And the nice thing about having done the workshop is that we can help them head off some of the challenges. And ultimately, they end up going back and organizing around value because it's really pretty core. But you don't have to try and do everything at once, remember? So, all right. So now we're going to create the implementation plan. So this is a pretty important part, right? So this is not just for the software teams, right? We want to take time to plan and prepare. There's a wide variety of toolkits that SPCs, Safe Program Consultants, have access to. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people try and launch an agile release stream without an SPC, only to find out later on that, oh, there's an art readiness checklist. There's actually a template for everything that you can download and use, which saves you dozens and dozens of hours. The training prepares the people. Baseline your metrics. That's a really important one. One of my safe heroes, my personal safe heroes, helped me early on my journey, M. Campbell Pretty. She has a great blog post about baseline metrics before you start. What's interesting is oftentimes it's hard to do that because you realize when you go to try and baseline your metrics, you realize you can't actually measure anything that has meaning. And so what do you baseline? So lots of times where you want this to be something that the LACE creates the plan, the LACE and the art leaders potentially together create that implementation plan, not just one person. So then you're going to choose an agile release train and you're going to go. And there's lots of articles out there. This piece here, you're looking for that sweet spot where you've got leadership, support, and engagement. You've got a clear product or solution. You got a problem to solve, and you've got teams that collaborate. And so you may not be able to find one that hits it in the bullseye, but understanding where you are on these particular dimensions can help you kind of find that best agile release train to launch. A little note here on role mapping. So there's another trend is that people will say, oh, we're implementing SAFe. That's why we hired you, Phil, to come in and help us. And here's our RTE and here's our product manager. And it's like, oh, well, what do you know about the RTE role? I know that they lead the agile release train. So that's why we chose project manager Charlene over here. Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way. There's actually some content out there that talks about the attributes and the skills. Those are critical, and the mindset of the person in these SAFe roles. So be aware, are you volunteering somebody? Did they volunteer or they voluntold, right? Titles will tell you a pool of potential candidates, but I would definitely not recommend one-on-one mapping because an iron-fisted professional who drives results and tells everybody what to do probably is not going to excel from the get-go as a release train engineer, where their job is really kind of facilitating and serving and helping everybody in this new way of working and getting through to execution. And so when you look at launching your art and coming up with your plan, be ready to respond to change over following a plan. I'll tell you that sometimes people will set a date and they may end up having to move it. That's okay, right? It does take a village. It's not a one-person thing. Oh, I hired Joe to be our RTE, and so the Agile release train launching on time is all for Joe, right? You want alignment before you launch. I'll tell you that I view the alignment between the product management, the business owner, the system architect. I view the alignment around the program backlog among those individuals as a huge leading indicator for success, for PI success. If you walk into PI planning and everybody's already aligned from a product and business and architecture perspective on what the work to bring in is, you won't have to have those arguments for the first time in front of your teams, causing a bunch of confusion. Whereas you can make the framework rigid by looking at a toggle switch and art roles. We're moving to safe. All of our PMPs are now RTEs and Scrum Masters. Period. We'll just send them to this 2-day class or this 3-day class, and they'll be set up for success, regardless of their skills, attributes, mindset, etc. Right? Or the playbook's the law. Right? Write a playbook, and this is how we launch safe for every art inside our enterprise. Well, every art is different. All right. So we're looking at preparing for our art launch. At this point, you're going to put your lean agile skills to the test. So a couple of things I mentioned already, that it's not just the RTE, the release train engineer's job. You need people from the leadership level engaged and involved, right? You'll want to use the toolkits. They're there for a reason. Practice transparency. We helped a customer recently, and the coach that was helping, I said, hey, can I look at the art readiness workbook? And he's like, well, it's on their server. We can't see it. It's like, well, then how can I help? How can I look and see if you might be more ready or not? And so making those type of artifacts like the art readiness workbook available to everybody, so everybody understands the change and what's happening. You want to prepare people for the new way of working. Also, your art launch, if you do choose to invest, you have the ability to invest in an outside consultant, an SPCT such as myself or another person from another partner. It's a huge opportunity for mentoring, right? I mean, have them shepherd you and help you and pass on those tips and tricks as they prepare. A common model is to have an SPC actually serve as the RTE during your first PI planning event, so that you can actually learn what it is that they do. Right now, if you're going to do that, I would recommend that you validate that they actually have done it before. I have seen situations where, the SPC has to do it, even though they'd never done it before. But make sure you have time for training when you look at preparing your art launch. If you know that you don't have anybody who's done this before, invest in the training. There's role-based training that you can do as you prepare to launch the art. So stay flexible, prepare everyone. It's toolkits and preparation. It's not a just check the box. You're always focusing on those living artifacts as you get going. Find a guide that's done it before, or if you don't have the budget to bring somebody in, that's okay. There's lots of webinars out there. There's Scaled Agile, typically 6-9 months or a year after they do a global summit, they make all of those keynotes and presentations available on Vimeo. There's lots of places you can learn from others who've done this before you. Take a Gemba walk. If you have the ability, you know somebody, or if you have a partner of the company you're working for that's implemented safe, go out there and observe a PI planning event. There's a retired soldier who's now on our team, and he's very experienced SPC. Hopefully, be able to co-teach my implementing safe classes with me next year. But he went through and got his SPC and had never seen PI planning. And I remember the look on his face when he was actually out there in the field watching it, and the difference, and everything clicked for him when he actually saw it in action. And so don't underestimate the power of Gemba. Refine the backlog of features, use some sort of economic prioritization model like WSJF or weighted shortest job first. Become rigid. Some of the anti-patterns there that can really make your art preparation not ideal, right? Assign one person to make it happen. Build that backlog in a bubble. I've seen it where the product managers work by themselves to create the backlog, and no one else sees it until PI planning. The architect is in a silo, never talks to product. IT launches this and everything, and they ask business to just show up for the draft plan review. I'll tell you that there's lots of good opportunities for engagement as you actually go to launch the art. So let me talk a little bit about that. So now it's time. We're going to launch the art, right? Number one leading indicator of success with SAFe is having all of the Agile release trains on the art go through the SAFe for Teams workshop together right before PI planning. It's like, what? You want us to train 100 people, 125 people all together? Yeah. And it's like, well, that just won't work. I said, well, then how will getting 125 people together the following day for a planning event work? If we can't facilitate them through a workshop and do a practice, kind of a mini simulation of PI planning, how do we plan on being able to actually do a real PI planning event? And so when I look at SAFe for Teams, it's unique. It's technically a class or a course, as a certification. For me, I call it the SAFe for Teams workshop because it's a dry run. You actually, as a facilitator, as a change agent, you get to actually watch how these teams integrate. And what's interesting is people will show up for SAFe for Teams and not know what team they're on, or they won't know who the product owner is. They won't know who the Scrum Master is. Well, aren't you glad that we actually did the SAFe for Teams workshop? Because otherwise they're going to show up at the PI planning event and have those same questions. It's a great opportunity to gain alignment and create excitement for your opportunity. So now that you've done it, it's time for PI planning. Now, the inputs and outputs, remember here that the input is the product and solution vision. We have a backlog at the program level of features and business features and enabler features. And we bring the top 10. By the way, we have 11. SAFe says you can only have top 10. Now, it doesn't work that way, right? So this is a guide. I will tell you that I've never actually had a customer launching an art that struggled with finding more than 10 features to bring in. I think the record was 267. They put that list in front of me at first. And I explained to them that if you do this, you'll spend the entire 5 days you'll need for PI planning trying to explain to people what these features are and what they aren't. And usually what you'll see is that people get better and better. If they don't understand, if their teams aren't organized around value, if they've got a bunch of complicated subsystem teams, or even inside the team, there's only one person who can code that. That's my code, that's Charlene's code, that's Mike's code. Only he can touch it or only she can touch it. Then sequencing trumps prioritization all the time. And you end up with a bunch of features where you really have one feature, but you break it into 27 features so that you have 1 or 2 per team. And there's all sorts of stuff like that. But when you look at the IO here, you want to bring in features that everybody's agreed upon, that have acceptance criteria, that have been through the analysis phase of your program Kanban flow. Then the PI planning magic happens. The output is the team's objectives. And those are rolled up into the program PI objectives for the whole Agile release train. If you're a member of an Agile release train, you run into a senior exec in the elevator, if you were going back in the office, and they say, hey, what are you working on this PI? Boom, boom, boom. That's the PI objectives. Those 5, 6 things that the whole PI is about for the whole Agile release train. You also come out with a dependency board where the teams have worked out agreements as to when they will help each other out to meet these key dependencies, not where a project manager or somebody has assigned teams these dependencies or said you're going to do this during this time. Teams come up with that plan themselves. There's also some other outputs such as a Roam board that actually says these are things that can stop you. And so that's kind of the PI planning flow. But at the end of the day here, everybody who is building, typo there, everybody who is building the solution is involved. Questions power the event. You want open dialogue. It's about the compromise you have to have. The plan is going to change. So, you want people engaged. One of the things that I used to tell people as we walk in, it's like you walk into the PI planning event. If you hear if everybody's up and about and you hear like this buzz, like you just walked into a busy restaurant on a Friday evening, it's probably going to be a good planning event. If you hear silence, everybody's heads down in front of a laptop at a table, probably have some opportunities there. So, you can really make the framework rigid by, where the word no is unacceptable. Only train the essential people, only invite the essential people, right? No business engagement, or you aren't set up for collaboration. And so this is an area where if you choose to invest in the Scaled Agile Framework as your path to business agility, then PI planning and doing it right, that's I heard Dean say, if you're not going to have PI planning and do it the way, and actually do it this way, where you actually have the teams create the plan during the event, then don't call it safe. And I slaughtered that quote. It wasn't actually a quote. It was more of he was talking about the 10 essential things. Don't call it safe. It's not doing these things, but PI planning is one of those. And just having 5 people show up in a room and say that's PI planning, or assigning the teams the stories and having them show up at a PI planning event when all the stories have already been assigned, why are we there, right? So it's time to execute. We've got our plan. Let's go, right? It's time to execute. And how do we actually coach that execution? So definitely avoid the safe says, the Scrum says, that you have to, you must. Understand that people are learning and growing and trying a new way of working. And so it's definitely important to have coaching during uncertain times. You're going to learn something by launching an art. You're going to learn something every PI, including the coaches. I learn something every day. And sometimes it's things that I wish I didn't have to learn, but we all have lessons to learn. Coaches, SPCs, SPCTs, everybody. And so when you're looking at the Agile release train as they go to execute the PI, are you demonstrating lean Agile leadership? Are your leaders leading by example, right? Is it the team's plan that's being executed, or is it somebody else's plan, like management's plan, right? Also, there's 2 parts to the commitment. People seem to forget that. At the end of the PI planning event, when we do a confidence vote, the team, there's 2 parts. 1, the team commits to everything in their power to meet these objectives that they themselves have written, by the way. And 2, they agree to immediately escalate if they see something that will prevent them from being able to meet those objectives. Sadly, the second part of the commitment, people seem to forget about it. And sometimes the culture, if it's bureaucratic or if it's pathological, it doesn't allow them to escalate. And you still end up those situations at the end of the PI, the business is surprised that something actually isn't being delivered when they actually found out in the first iteration of the PI that it wasn't going to be feasible. But the team's trying for 2 sprints to fix it. And then dev management tries for a sprint to fix it. And then leadership tries for a sprint to fix it. And the next thing you know, the PI is over and it wasn't fixed. And so you've been in one of those companies. All right. So also the INA. I'll tell you that this is where, what I tell people is the INA, the Inspect and Adapt event, this is where teams become a team. I like to run the INA where it's more open space based, where you work on the problems that are interesting to you as opposed to someone assigning you a problem. If they assign me, hey, Phil, you get to work on our DevOps pipeline. Yeah, that sounds, but what over there's the portfolio stuff. I want to go over there. Anyway, point being is that, when you look at this, transparency and candor are important. And remember, we do an INA. We absolutely will say, hey, here's our PI system demo. It's awesome. Look at all the amazing things that's happened to our solution over the course of the last quarter, or roughly quarter. And here's our quantitative and qualitative metrics. But now here's the things that we saw stop us. Let's actually dig down and get the root cause. And we go through a series of steps in this problem-solving workshop, and the output of that is actually inputs to our backlog, actionable things that we can do. And I will tell you that it's really awesome to watch as you end the INA with an elevator pitch to leadership and to product about and architecture about the things that you want to bring into PI planning, these potential enabler features or sometimes features to bring into PI planning. And the next day PI planning starts and they kick it off with, hey, thanks for all your effort during the INA. We've now added this new feature. And it's now prioritized for our PI. There's a huge benefit in seeing that happen. So when you look at this, the plan's important, not set in stone. Objectives of the mission, you want to optimize for flow. During the execution of the PI, you want to stay connected with art syncs. It's interesting. SAFe says you have to have a system demo. Therefore, we have an event called a system demo where all of our teams demonstrate what they've done. Well, is that a system demo? Because a system demo is where you demonstrate the integrated. It's already been integrated. There's a huge difference between seeing something that's been fully integrated and seeing something that's where you bring all the teams together to each show their piece of it. And so definitely you want to demo the working solutions throughout the PI through an integrated system demo, not just simply a shared team demo. Lots of different ways to make the framework rigid. You can have management call all the shots. The RTE's the boss. It's funny. I met a colonel once, and her captain was the RTE, and she said, "Well, that's the person who's in charge of the art." And as she learned more about SAFe, she realized that, oh, well, product management is probably a little bit more in what features do we do, and the business owner is probably the one who's really looking at the strategy of the art, and in between product and maybe it's a collaboration, and the RTE is there to shepherd in the new way of working. And so last thing I'll say on here is that I've seen situations where people don't want the developers and the testers and the people on the teams to talk to anybody in the business, those senior stakeholders. That's not going to get you the best results long term. In fact, what you might find is that by allowing those stakeholders to talk to the teams, you'd be surprised at how fast impediments that you've been struggling with for a long time get resolved. I've seen situations where hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work would have happened if that business owner had not been in the PI planning event talking to the teams during the team breakouts, because misunderstandings regarding what product thought the business owner wanted, misunderstandings regarding communications between a government customer and the program manager, all sorts of fun stuff like that. So getting to the end of our implementation roadmap here, we've now successfully launched our first art. We've learned from it, and now it's time to launch more arts and value streams. No matter how your first PI turns out, it's valuable, right? You want to learn what worked and what worked and what didn't work and why, right? Look at your unresolved risks. Check your metrics. Are you organized around value? I've been at large scale corporations where they had, big bang, lots and lots of arts. And I remember being involved in a business unit, and the goal that I was tasked with was to create an exemplar inside this corporation that showed lean portfolio management and agile release trains working together. And so it was my customer was the business and IT together, and they were a unified team saying, let's just change the way we work. This is 5 years ago almost, and 4 years ago, and the portfolio is still running. After that success, it was we launched the arts in late January, early February. We had 4 arts. I remember their chief marketing officer of this Fortune 10 came in and was talking about how they've now delivered more value by May than they did the entire previous calendar year. Well, hearing that type of endorsement from a senior business exec basically caused everybody to come out of the woodwork and want to implement SAFe. And so they started doing that. They started hiring more consultants and hiring more coaches and launching more arts without understanding why did this particular cybersecurity business unit have so much unprecedented success. It was executive engagement. It was leadership engagement. It was focused on keeping the framework flexible. And when the other agile release trains were launched and left all that out, some of them worked, some of them didn't, because they were really rigid and prescriptive. And so learn from your first art, learn from your second art, learn from every art you launch, and keep improving the way you approach the framework. As you gain more personal experience with it, and the leaders that are involved gain more experience, just always learn. There's never going to be a perfect way to do this. Okay? So each art's unique. This is really where you want to have some communities of practice so people can learn from each other, be willing to explore, assume variability, preserve options. And the last thing there on the keeping it flexible is invest in each art as you did the first. I did a brief engagement with a credit card company or bank, and they were early adopters of SAFe and did fantastic, but then it kind of just started petering out. And it turns out that, oh, well, we don't train people anymore, right? We don't, yeah, we don't worry about that anymore. We don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. Well, the things that allows you to succeed when you first got started, if you stop doing all those things, it's not going to have that work. And so, the first art's way is the only way. Each art is unique, right? It's not one size fits all. And you definitely want to create your network, both internal and external, to help you figure out ways to continue to scale. Now, when we talk about extending the portfolio, this is something that I'm going to watch the time here because I tend to love talking about this particular topic. So lean portfolio management, it's a hot topic right now with Scaled Agile. And if you've seen any of my talks, it's one that is near and dear to my heart because I've seen so much success when a company implements this alongside their SAFe implementation. Now, if you think that launching an art with a new mindset's hard, try extending the portfolio. The mindset shift required to change the way a corporation chooses to fund is significant. And you have to work your way through some uncomfortable things, such as, believe it or not, I've heard that some people have ROIs in their business case that they can't validate. They just kind of pick a number and throw it out there because they have no way of measuring it, but they also count on nobody checking. Just kidding, that doesn't really ever happen. Or that people will complete a project where everybody knows it's not going to work, but because it's funded, they have to finish it or they won't get funding next year. That never happens either, right? And so LPM is all about collaboration. It's a major mindset shift. It can be really, really hard. I will tell you there's a new challenge out there now, which is any SPC out there can go through an enablement and teach the lean portfolio management course, whether they've actually done it or not. And so there's a lot of LPM that's being rolled out where the person who's instructing them hasn't actually ever done it. And so be aware that this is a serious change. I've not encountered a company or corporation yet that says, hey, this is our third attempt at implementing SAFe and within our portfolio, and we're going to get it right the third time. I have seen companies that have implemented SAFe more than once because the first time they launched the art, they really weren't really set up for keeping the framework flexible. They were more rigid, and they try it again and they do it differently. But the portfolio is a significant change, and so definitely you want to build in the ability to find these pivot points. You learn to love leading indicators, ignore sunk costs, right? Understand that LPM is not a role or an organization that's owned and ran by a director. It's a series of collaborations, and there's some radical, not really radical, but there's some new ways of working that are considered radical by the fiduciaries, such as participatory budgeting. Using a tool like that to actually help understand where we want to fund. Now, I will tell you that I love participatory budgeting, and when I first heard about it, I was playing with Monopoly money during this thing at the 2018 SAFe Summit. Anyway, I was not sold, but now that I've done it a few times, one of my favorite stories was participatory budgeting that we knew was not going to be truly effective, but we did it anyway to practice because they're going to do it again for real 6 months later. And the business was like really frustrated. These business executives were like, why? How the heck can we prioritize this stuff? We don't know anything what this epic actually is. What does this mean? We don't have any of the details on it. How can we prioritize it? And you watch the VP of IT just drop his mic, right? It's like, yeah, that's what life is for us, right? You want us to build all this stuff and commit to all this stuff, but we don't know anything about the work. And so there's lots of lessons along the way. Now, the flip side of this, LPM is something that sadly I've seen implemented in a very rigid fashion, which is we're going to basically take the SAFe paintbrush and we're going to paint it all over what we already do, right? We're going to buy a nice expensive value stream management tool, and we're going to set it up like a project management tool, right? The PMO owns everything. We're not going to touch the way we prioritize or fund. We're going to use Moscow to prioritize instead of WSJF because Moscow is what we've already been using. What? we can't run that by senior executives. Senior executives can't be involved here. They're not ever going to come and collaborate with a business owner and look at this. No, right? So it is a new way of working, and it is a significant change. And so the last thing I'll say is that when you look at this, your SAFE journey, it's about business agility. And to truly get the most out of the framework, you want to continuously be pursuing greater business agility. And there are 7 core competencies that are part of the framework. Launching an art, that's lean agile leadership, team and technical agility, and agile product delivery. 3 of the 7, right? But there's a lot of opportunities in these other parts of the 7 core competencies of business agility. So in closing, stay flexible, create foster this culture of relentless improvement, create that generative culture where people have psychological safety, invest in your people, empower them, as opposed to creating a playbook or process for SAFE, changing only when management's comfortable, and choosing documentation over collaboration. So that said, I will stop there. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording for right now.